Justin Glaser is the author of Sweat, Uncovering Your Body's Superpower, a book that redefines how we think about perspiration. Blending science, storytelling, and health insights, he explores the evolutionary, physiological, and psychological roles of sweat in human performance and well-being. Known for making complex biology accessible and engaging, Justin shines a light on one of the body's most overlooked superpowers. Through his work, he invites readers to embrace sweat not just as a byproduct of exertion, but as a vital force in health and human potential.
Let's go, part 2. Good to have you here, Justin.
Good to be here.
So we got this documentary coming out. So for those that don't know, you wrote this book called Sweat, talking about the effects of the sauna.
Yes.
And a big part of that book was talking about this niacin sauna protocol.
Yeah.
And now you're doing a documentary on it. So what's the documentary?
Yeah. So I wrote Sweat, Uncovering Your Body's Hidden Superpower. And we talked about that in the last interview, which really explores the environmental toxin issue and then how sweat and sauna are actually the best solutions for it. And then one of the stories I came across in it was how 9/11 survivors used a sauna protocol to heal when nothing else worked. And, you know, coming across that, I realized that it was widely unknown. And so we decided to create a short documentary about it, interviewing 9/11 survivors, sauna experts, doctors, and more people to bring that story to life.
Can you check out the trailer?
Yeah.
Taking up to 13 medications at a time and fighting for every breath.
I was 42 years old and all of a sudden had all of these aches and pains and unable to breathe.
And on working in a toxic cloud of dust and rubble. A lot of those early responders, mainly firefighters, started falling ill.
So I was given tranquilizers, 2 different inhalers, codeine cough syrup, steroids.
Well, now a clinic offering an unconventional treatment claims it can get rid of those poisons and give sufferers back their lives. Ellen Marks is here now with more.
We interviewed 9/11 survivors, leading doctors, toxicology experts, and more to bring you this widely unknown, unbelievable story.
Well, everyone's saying we're polluted, but nobody knows what to do about it.
If you could go to your doctor and he'd say, take this pill and you'll have a 40% less chance of all-cause mortality, it would be on every cover of every magazine and every TV show.
Through exclusive interviews, discover how this sauna protocol can transform your health in the modern world and holds the key to uncovering your body's hidden superpower.
Once you hear this, you can't unhear it.
It's so crazy. What's so crazy about it is that from reading the book, you know, you see these crazy effects that it had on people doing this protocol. And yet, like you were saying before, like no one knows about it. It's like the most crazy hidden thing. I was actually talking with a lady the other day who runs like a holistic cancer center helping people deal with cancer, and I brought it up to her, and even she didn't have an idea. She didn't know about it. It's crazy the effects that they're having. What did you kind of see from that?
Well, the effects for who?
For the people doing this protocol.
Yeah. So the initial batch of people. So during 9/11, massive exposure to toxins, first responders, but then also people who just went back to work in that area. And ultimately, it was something like 500,000 people had some exposure. So people going back to the office, like the woman in my trailer, Anne-Marie, she just went back to her office and there was a layer of like dust from the buildings in there, thinking it was nothing. And then symptoms started happening. Lung issues, memory issues, balance issues, dizziness, fatigue, all these things. And so they put them on pills. They tried different things, but nothing was getting to the root cause, which was inhaling these environmental toxins that then couldn't get out of the body and were causing all these symptoms. And then the clinic they set up, the sauna clinic, was 500 people initially, and every single one of them got better because it dealt with the root cause through the best possible way, which was this niacin sauna protocol. So yeah, every issue they were dealing with was healed because it got to the root cause issue. So this extreme example of toxicity showed why this is so powerful. So it's pretty wild.
It's a pretty intense protocol, right?
It's, I mean, it's intense, but it's incredibly safe when done properly. It just involves niacin, which is a vitamin B, sauna, supplements, and then binders. And then it's a, properly dosed component of those for 30 days. And you want to make sure you're doing it properly. So there are coaches who teach it and guide people through it. For the 9/11 survivors, it's different for me and you to do it today for health reasons, just to feel better, which is a large argument I'm arguing, is that everyone should do it because of exposure. But if you were a 9/11 survivor, you're dealing with different things. So you're dealing with, she sounded like Darth Vader. Her daughter wouldn't let her drop her off at school because her lungs were so bad. And so that was a slower, more life or death circumstance to be doing the protocol. But it is safe. It is intense to do, and there's people experience like emotional symptoms from the detoxing and all of that. So it's a pretty crazy thing.
And it helps with lung issues as well.
Yeah, it cleared up her pulmonary issues.
That surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wouldn't expect sweating and just a sauna protocol to help out with lung issues. It seems like those things would be like disconnected in a way.
Well, a lot of for them specifically, like the environment, I think this is my argument. The environmental toxin issue today, we're not dealing with, in most circumstances, we can get into the LA wildfires, but in most circumstances, we're not breathing in those substances. We're getting it through our clothes, through our food. So it's not like a straight into the lungs.
Mm-hmm.
So she was breathing it in at her office. And then those fat-soluble toxins are in the lungs, and this is what allowed it to get out of that area.
So essentially what happens is these toxins store in fat, which is hard to get rid of fat. Everyone knows that it's hard to lose weight, and then of that percentage of weight you lose, obviously, not all of it's fat. So it's very hard to get rid of toxins stored in fat in general.
Yes.
And a lot of these toxins get stored in fat.
Yeah. To back up a little bit, what people first need to believe is that toxins are bad. And what are toxins, right? So environmental toxins are essentially man-made chemicals and heavy metals. Those are the two categories. We've dealt with heavy metals for a long, long time. And then man-made chemicals we've introduced over 100,000 man-made chemicals through the Industrial Revolution in the last 60 years. So that's a new thing. And most of those haven't been studied, and the ones that have, there's a ton of problems with them. And then a large subset of them are fat-soluble toxins, which means they store in the fat. So they're called lipophilic. And they have different half-lives, so they stay in the body for different lengths of time. That's why you hear the term like forever chemicals, because they stay in hypothetically forever. And they're incredibly difficult to get out, but when you have them in, they just cause all of these problems. I'm losing my train a little bit, but yeah, those are the categories. So first you have to believe that it's an issue, and then the question is how do you get it out? And the argument I'm laying out, and that 9/11 survivors kind of is an extreme example to show, is this niacin sauna protocol, because niacin has this miraculous ability to open fat cells, dump the toxins into the blood, and then sauna has the amazing ability to then sweat it out. So timed properly, it's this miracle solution to this modern problem, mainly because of the environmental toxin issue.
So when you're interviewing these people, what were you hearing from them? Like, what were they saying about the changes and effects that they had from it?
Well, a lot of them were at the end of their rope.
Yeah, because over 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, it was interesting. A lot of them were kind of getting gaslit by the government around their symptoms. They thought it was trauma. They were like, oh, you can't get out of bed because of trauma, or you're experiencing dizziness because of trauma, or your lung issues. And then they go to doctors and they kept prescribing pills, steroids, tranquilizers, all these different things. But it's not the root cause thing. And so, for Anne-Marie specifically, they made her sign a waiver that they weren't responsible for her life when they opened this sauna clinic, because they were like, you're really close to we don't want to be responsible if something happens. We think we can help. And so she signed it. And so for a lot of them, it was like, oh, wow, this is actually working. I don't know why it's working, but this sauna protocol is helping me. And so ultimately, a few thousand people went through it. Then it's like, how don't we know about this?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is just, I think, a reverse incentive structure, which is not only is there no incentive for people to know about this, there's a reverse incentive for people to not talk about it for certain interests.
Because there's nothing to push. There's nothing to sell.
You can sell saunas. You can sell niacin supplements.
But those aren't the people who are, have the big marketing dollars behind it to, push the agenda.
And I think it's as going through the research and going through it, it's that's like an obvious question. It's like, well, who am I to come across this information and believe that someone else wouldn't have shared it. But like I said, I think when you follow incentives, it becomes clear why some things are popular and some things aren't. If entire industries aren't incentivized to talk about something, you wouldn't talk about it. You can take any example. It's like if some software comes along and, the insurance industry is going to put insurance agents out of business, they're going to dismiss it just because their self-interest is not aligned. It doesn't make them good or bad. It's just is what it is.
Were you just shook when you came across this for the first time? Were you like, what the hell? How do I not know that this is a thing? Like, how have I never heard about this?
To a degree, because I had my own weird health challenges in like my 20s, my early 20s, which slowly peeled back like that incentive structure thing and realizing like, oh, my interest.
Had the realization that a lot of fuckery, for lack of a better word, kind of goes on.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd kind of realized that. And so it wasn't too big of a shock for me. But I guess I was more surprised that more people, even within the natural health community, weren't pushing it because the thesis made so much sense to me that I kept looking for like, show me where this is wrong. Show me where the environmental toxin issue isn't as big as people like Dr. Joe Pizzorno say it is. Show me where sauna and sweat actually aren't the best solution. Then show me that this niacin protocol isn't like a miracle solution for this issue. And then I'll stop. But like I couldn't find that, so I just kept going. And if I find it, I'll stop. But like I haven't found a compelling argument against any of those points.
Yep.
And if you keep extending those points, it becomes kind of crazy because it's, okay, environmental toxins are linked to lowered IQ in babies because mothers pass it on to their children. What about a study where we had mothers go through this protocol prior to getting pregnant?
And then so much different stuff you could do there.
Yeah. Like there's, once you accept those few underlying points, then it becomes this like crazy, like, well, what if we test this, and this? So that's part of, why I'm trying to spread awareness through the book and the documentary and just start the conversation around these ideas. Because even in like the niche natural health community, like it's still not
fully known
or accepted.
Yeah.
And I think you just got to kind of keep promoting a message until the conversation could be had, and then it could be weighed, how legitimate it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think about like, I didn't know about this before meeting you.
Yeah.
And I was already like very deep. I was like 4 years into looking into health and, a more natural way of doing things. And I had no idea. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like for myself, like when I'm up at night staring at the wall and I think about ripping jewels in high school and vaping and those marijuana vapes, those pens.
Yeah.
And like all the shit, it kind of freaks me out. And I think there's a lot of guys or people in general that, they didn't live the healthiest life in high school or in college. And, now they're in their 20s and in their 30s and they're a little worried about, some of the effects of that. And I feel like this protocol is a great protocol to go through and kind of just cleanse. You hear so much about like 7-day detox cleanse of taking a bunch of nonsense juices. And like, I feel like that probably doesn't do too much, but when you break it down, the protocol, it makes perfect sense to me how it would be so long lasting in the effects.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things is I was just rereading Dr. Joe Pizzorno's book. So Dr. Pizzorno is like considered the godfather of environmental medicine, which is like the study. He essentially started, he kept treating people through nutrition. And then he pivoted to realizing the toxin issue and started becoming obsessed with it, understanding what it is. And one of the research studies he was looking at was, I think, PCB concentration in people.
What is that?
It's one of the I can't even.
One of the forever chemicals.
I think it's a forever
Okay.
chemical. Not sure about that.
One chemical. Some bad.
One environmental toxin that's terrible for you. And it was looking at like concentrations in a cohort over like a 20-year period. And the idea was like, even if they were different, the health outcomes weren't noticeable until like 15, 20 years out, because the toxin damage to the system started running down the whole system, which then started causing problems in the future. So like, even if from your 20s and 30s, you're not experiencing it, having a lower toxic load in this age bracket, hypothetically then improves your outcomes down the line. Even if right now you have high levels and someone else has low levels and you appear the same in like your health metrics, you know, it's going to cause all these issues. And he breaks down all the different categories of damage that toxins do to you, from damaging your DNA to your enzymes and just all the different pieces, which
cascading
very quickly becomes above my pay grade. But, you know, broken down to a 3rd, 5th grade level is digestible for everyone to understand.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of like the seed oil conversation, because, you know, you have the people on one side of the spectrum, like the more conventional side of things, who say seed oils aren't bad for you. We don't have a lot of studies. We don't have any studies that really prove that these things are causing long-lasting damage, and in some cases even causing positive effects. Whereas you have the other people, like the Paul Saladinos of the world, telling you that the issue and why you don't see these things in studies is because the studies aren't across a 30-year time span, which it takes a long time because these toxins are stored in your fat, like we were talking about before, for it to become an issue for you. It's going to be, you know, this long time, and we don't have studies showing that. It's a interesting conversation. It's funny.
Yeah. Well, the study component is interesting, but then the anecdotal, like just the look with your eyes kind of thing. That's why I think the 9/11 example, or like Gulf War survivors, is like this startling, just obvious example that kind of proves the thesis, because it's like 100% of people cured, but nothing else worked. Why? Because this theory makes sense. So yeah.
What do you think how big of a difference do you think in terms of like, after looking at, you know, these people who've gone through this protocol, like if everybody did this protocol, how big of a difference do you think it would make?
I think you can make some pretty insane claims, which is what I'm convinced of, and which is why I'm like putting myself out there as someone without a medical degree, just pretty much acting as an investigative journalist.
Yeah, and I think we should preface with that, because like how you came into this, like you briefly mentioned, you had your own health issues. You started doing the sauna, and maybe you could tell the story, but you started doing the sauna, you started feeling a lot better, and then you're like, well, there might be something here. It ended up turning into a book exploring the effects of sweating and sauna. And then that turned into, you know, the sub part of the book, which was the 9/11 survivors, which now is turning into the documentary.
Those are the breadcrumbs.
Those are the breadcrumbs,
Yeah, so in college it started with just kind of getting hit with a lot of fatigue, brain fog. They call them ANTs, automatic negative thinking, which I argue was probably like heavy metal accumulation in my brain. And so that led to trying north of a dozen different things to help, from like Western doctors, getting on, you know, a new diet, exercise, the usual things, Ayurvedic, acupuncture, chiropractic, just like whatever I could, and nothing was making a dent. Stumbling into a sauna after college, felt relief after a single session, didn't know why, and then kept going. And then ultimately that's what really got me back. And then during that process, joining online communities, researching, reaching out to experts, and kind of reverse engineering why it was helping me and so many other people, which was cool because there was no like placebo. Like I didn't think it was going to help me, but then seeing the theory behind it made a lot of sense to me. And then that led to, you know, wanting to put the book out because I didn't feel like anyone had put that together properly. And then this documentary to bring even more attention to it.
It is really crazy. So as you were saying before, we were talking about I forgot where we were going before I stopped you.
The insane claims of
insane claims. Thank you.
Like what? If the United States believes this, And then let's say like the health administration, the FDA, and or the big players start saying this is true. We're going to take this seriously. What would that look like? That would probably look like sauna clinics getting set up
everywhere.
People going through the Niacin sauna protocol. Women who are expecting to get pregnant going through it. Setting up multi-thousand person studies to test it. But what I think would happen is you'd see massive plummeting in autoimmune issues, massive plummeting in, I'll say, cancer rates because of the tie-in of environmental toxins with like immune system functioning and all this stuff. I think you'd see increased IQ in the future generation whose parents went through the protocol. I think you'd see increased IQ in the people who go through it at any age, to be honest. The brain's 60% fat, and a lot of this stores in the brain, and a lot of it has impacts on cognitive function, which was my experience. It's like my brain felt like it turned on after going through the protocol.
Yeah, what was your experience like overall?
It was a lot of brain fog pre-sauna, and then sauna took away like layers of brain fog. And then the Niacin protocol was like, it felt like I wasn't questioning if my brain was fully if I wasn't questioning if I had brain fog anymore. It was like, oh, this is like childlike function. Like I got it back.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. It's really weird because you don't have a comparison. Like all you have is your own reference experience. And so my comparison was seeing other people who've been through it, and like looking in their eye and being like, there's like a brightness there, there's a sharpness there. Like, what do I have to lose? Let me try. And so, yeah, I mean, the claims are utterly insane. And like, I'm aware of that, but I'm also like
convinced there's something.
I'm convinced someone show this is wrong. Show me why this is the most important health intervention we could implement at scale. And that would have the most transformative effect on people.
So you think that this would be the most having people do how often? Like once a year, once?
Well, the current, and again, it's like the research is limited. The current understanding is that a 30-day Niacin sauna protocol gets rid of a third of the body's stored toxins. And so you want to go through it 3 times and you separate them out a little bit. Again, different arguments for how long to wait.
Yep.
But yeah, you go through it like 3 times and you've cleared out decades of stored toxins that have been messing with all of your function. I've only been through it once, so I've got a couple more to go.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, that's the argument. And that's not the only thing, right? The other pieces are like if you're not healthy to start with, like your detox pathways aren't running great. But sweat's easy because you don't have to, it's not like getting your...
It's not active.
It can jumpstart the other things working better. But yeah, I've never verbalized like those components of like all right, if this is true, what does that mean for health? That's what it means for health.
Yeah,
I think.
At a scale. I believe it, dude. I think it's, I mean, I haven't done it myself. I've seen the benefits of doing just a simple sauna consistently and how good you feel just anecdotally, but I would love to do it. So if, for the person listening that wants to try this, break it down for us. How does it work? What do you do? How long? The whole
I'll give the rundown. I'll give the safe at home try version.
Okay. And then give the extremists for the crazy ones.
Yeah. So if you know how to like sauna, if you've been to a sauna and you don't want to do this before you've ever used a sauna, like get used to using sauna. And then what you're going to do is dry or infrared sauna. You're going to go buy flushing niacin. Niacin B3 is B3. You can get it at GNC, Whole Foods. Make sure it's the flushing type. You're going to get 50 or 100 milligram tablets. And then you can do 5 days, but really just start with like 3 days. Day 1, you're going to take 50 to 100 milligrams. So you take the niacin. What's going to happen in like 10 to 30 minutes is you're going to get a flush. So you're going to look like you're sunburned and it's going to sting. And you're going to think something's going wrong, but nothing's going wrong. It's totally normal and healthy. And then you're going to wait. In the full protocol, you wait 2.5 hours. You could do this too. Wait 2.5 hours, exercise for 20 to 30 minutes to mobilize everything. And then you're going to sauna for up to an hour, essentially. And you can get in and out of the sauna, but just you're trying to sweat a lot. And then after the sauna, you're going to take activated charcoal, which you should do, second supplement you should get. Which is a binder so that the niacin's releasing everything. You're sweating a lot out, but the charcoal is binding onto what hasn't been, so it's not circulating. and it'll pull it out the other way.
So charcoal after.
Charcoal after.
Got it.
You're going to do a few days, so it's going to kind of blend. But yeah. So then day 2, what happens is if you take the same amount of niacin each day, you're not going to flush. So you have to, it's called titrating. You go up a little bit. So you're going to go from 100 to 200. And then the next same process, you're just raising the supplement amount. And then 300 and then 400. And you should really stop at 400 or 500 before, then you're heading into like the 30-day protocol territory where you should be using a whole list of like replenishing supplements and timing it and tracking your weight and like all this stuff that kind of comes into it.
Yeah, because there's dehydration issues and that whole
dehydration issues, but you're also sweating a ton, which you need to replenish, lost minerals and vitamins and all this stuff. But yeah, if you want to get a taste for it, you can do up to 400 or 500 milligrams.
Yeah, that's a cool try. So what's the full?
But make sure you sauna because you're liberating a lot of toxins and you don't want to just take the flushing niacin and then not sweat a lot of the stuff out.
Yep, because then it's just
it'll circulate and pocket in different places.
Yeah, you're just mobilizing it. You're not getting rid of it. Got it. So, and then the 30-day protocol. What's the full 30-day protocol?
Full 30-day protocol. It's the same thing. You're going from 100 milligrams up to 3,000 milligrams or 3 grams.
3,000.
It's so funny. Everyone has that reaction. I think it's because you say 100 first.
Yeah, exactly.
100 milligrams up to 3 grams.
What's the standard dose of niacin? Is it 100? Like if you get a bottle at GNC,
it'll. I think there's 50, 100. There might be a 500 milligram one.
Okay, so it's not like crazy.
I mean, yeah, it's yeah.
Like I take like 12x the dose of magnesium. Like, it's not nothing too crazy.
3,000 milligrams is 3 grams. Yeah. What do people take? Like 5 grams of creatine a day. Anyway, but it's different substance. I don't know the science fully. So yeah, you're doing that with like a box of like replenishing supplements. Like you get your vitamin A, E, B, like all the stuff that's sent to you.
Okay, so there's like a company you're saying that does
there's the guy whose father ran the 9/11 clinic. So the guy who ran the 9/11 clinic, his son coaches people through the detox protocol.
Got it.
So he, you can hire him and through Zoom, he'll coach you through the whole thing. And there's like 1 or 2 other people I'm aware of that do this, but it's not like this is like if this fully took off, you'd expect a booming industry around it. He's actually trying to set up a similar model to Perspire, which is like the sauna studios, where you can sauna, but they also have people trained in the protocol.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
To take people through it.
Yep.
Which, I think is a great mission.
And if you want to do it on your own, like if you don't want to coach, is there some good resources to kind of do it, to figure out how to do it on your own?
Yeah, I talk about it quite a bit in my book.
Sweat. Get yourself a copy.
Yeah, I'd like to lay out more of like a done-for-you solution for people, so you don't need to get a coach. But for now, I wouldn't recommend going through the 30 days without it.
Because it is kind of extreme.
Yeah, like you can mess up and misdose and like it's taxing, and you want to make sure you don't have like underlying conditions that could be aggravated or things like that.
Yep. But
there's not a whole lot that
could go wrong. It's very safe.
It's safe. It's just intense. Like
yeah,
it's a lot of sauna. It's a lot of liberating of things that have been in your body for a long time. There's a lot of emotional things that people experience. Apparently,
weird. Interesting.
Yep. Mine wasn't that weird, but people can have bizarre experiences.
I've had some friends I have a friend who had like really bad back pain, like chronic back pain, and did like intense breath work stuff. And it was like, and then he started having like emotional traumatic releases and stuff. And then it got rid of the back. So I believe it. Like it makes sense to me that doing those protocol or doing the sauna in that way, in that intense way, would cause some, emotional release in people.
Yeah. Well, I think there's that component, like the somatic, I think you're saying. But then there's somatic also like, again, it's so hard to like pinpoint this, but like there's a guy I've been following, Clark Engelbert, who's like a heavy metal specialist. And he argues that essentially he works on like mineral rebalancing. And what he experiences with people is when he detoxes the heavy metals and rebalances the minerals, because the heavy metals take on some of the roles of the minerals that are missing.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, and people have crazy psychological symptoms. It's almost like their personality shifts when they are able to get the metals out and replenish the minerals.
That's so crazy.
It's happening in the brain or something.
I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. That whole world is crazy to me. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Continue.
No, that was this week. I was just researching what he was saying, which was interesting. So yeah, there's psychological experiences that people have for sure.
Yeah, I did this internship when I was in college with this guy who is like health coach, lab work specialist, analyst to professional athletes, and he's kind of at like the cutting edge sphere of all this stuff. And he had a client come to him, and this guy was late in his 30s, towards the end of his NFL career. He was a quarterback, one of the top NFL quarterbacks, and he just had the worst season of his life. Fatigued, brain fog, a lot of the same symptoms you're talking about.
Yeah.
And he was thinking that his career as an NFL quarterback kind of caught up to him. That, he's late, he's starting to get old, all those hits are adding up and all this stuff. And, they started talking, they started looking at his blood work. They do like a super detailed questionnaire. One of the things that they found through the combination of the blood work, it's hard to tell certain toxins in the body through just blood alone. But through the combination,
because it stores in the fat.
Because it stores in the fat, exactly. Yeah. That's a great point. Through the combination of the blood work and his questionnaire, he was an avid fisherman and loved to deep sea fish.
Okay.
And would always eat the fish that he caught.
Oh, okay.
And would do that religiously in the off season. That was his thing. And they put him on a very intense detox protocol. I don't know the specifics because I wasn't involved. This is just a story that was relayed to me of, I don't know what they did exactly. But he came back the next season and finished second in MVP voting and was like a whole new person. And it totally changed. He thought he was like having early onset CTE and all this stuff.
Yeah.
When in reality, like all the stuff that you've been talking about, it was just heavy metals.
Yeah. That happened to Tony Robbins too.
Yeah, I remember.
Because he was on a mostly fish and like salad diet for a while, and he'd be on stage and forget things and was like, "What's going on?" And it turned out he had like insane levels of, I think it was mercury, and I had to do like chelating and all this stuff to get it out.
Yeah,
so
it's interesting because people, have the perception of fish being like one of the healthiest things you could eat, which it's delicious and has great macros, but definitely could cause some heavy metal issues with the way the oceans are being polluted and whatnot.
Yep.
Yeah, crazy. So we kind of broke down this protocol. We talked about some of the things that it could kind of help with. But in, researching the book, writing the book, having these conversations with these people, do you think, like, is it for everybody? Like, who do you feel like is the best audience for something like this? It seems like it's almost everybody in a way.
I think it is. I mean, maybe not little kids.
Yeah.
And pregnant women once they're pregnant.
But before they're pregnant, when they're preparing to, it seems like you were saying.
I think it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
For every reason. There's crazy stuff. Like, women are less likely to have breast cancer if they breastfeed. And the argument is because they pass along the toxins through the breast milk. So it's going to the small child. So, yeah. So I think everyone should do it. The question is how? How does this like reach scale, or how does it reach like a critical mass in terms of entering sort of the cultural conversation around it? Yeah. But like you said, like it's crazy. You've interviewed a lot of people in like the health space, and maybe one or two people have mentioned niacin, not even.
No, I think you're the only person who really brought it up to me.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind. And every person I tell, it's like it's a fun party trick for me now, telling people about this niacin sauna protocol.
What's the reaction?
Everyone's like, what the fuck? Like, for lack of a better word, it's like, I'll tell people about these 9/11 survivors and how they were having cascading health effects from, being exposed, and that, there was this clinic that was, doing this niacin sauna protocol. And there was I think, what was the stat you put in the book? It was 90% or something. I forget. It's been a while since I read it. But about the reduction in symptoms that people were experiencing.
It was 87% got off their medications within a certain time period. Yeah. A lot of self-reported increase in statistical in IQ and choice reaction time. Yeah, just crazy stuff.
Fucking crazy.
Yeah. But it's a terrible thing to have happened, but it's an amazing thing we have this extreme example to show what it can do. And then that's why it's hey, let's set up a nonprofit that allows us to set up studies on regular people at different levels and test that against a control on their disease levels, their intelligence, their their health levels, all this stuff.
How did you feel when you were in the protocol, when you were doing it yourself?
Well, I had done sauna a lot for 2 years. While doing it, a lot of people were like, oh, I sauna and I feel really clear right afterwards. It's kind of another level of that. It's the clearest you'll ever feel. In my experience and other people's is you do niacin sauna, you come out and it's a level of mental clarity. It's the movie. I remember the movie Limitless with Brad Cooper.
Great movie.
I remember watching it in college and being well, that'd be so cool to your brain's on. And now looking at it, it's that's just how your brain should feel. There's something wrong if you don't feel sharp. Not that I'm always sharp, but the level's kind of gone up. And people who do it have had that experience. So as I lose my train of thought. Yeah, it's incredibly powerful and massively under talked about. And there's so many, once you accept the ideas, there's so many things people could do to help spread it and figure out how to make it more mainstream.
And when you were doing it was it super difficult? How did you feel during the protocol?
It was a commitment, for sure.
It's a commitment.
The nice thing to know is when you're in the sauna, the two things that are annoying are the niacin flush is not, some people like it. I kind of like it. Some people don't like it at all. You can look at pictures. It's you look like you just were baking in the sun.
Yeah, you get flushed.
Yeah. And it burns, and you'll see spots, and the argument is that the red spots are where you have deposits and stuff. I'm not sure about that.
Because what is the flush? What's going on there? What's causing the flush?
This is where the science gets a little tricky. What's happening with what's called rebound lipolysis is that's the process that allows the fat cells to rupture and open. And a lot of people said that those are the same things, the flush and that rebound lipolysis, but it's a separate mechanism apparently. So I don't want to go past my pay grade.
Yeah.
But you have the flush. That's not pleasant. And then doing the sauna protocol is, it's just an hour 15 in the infrared sauna every single day. And so you do 45 in, take a break, another 30, break. So it's just a regimented commitment.
Yep.
And then the supplements, you're taking a lot of supplements.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, so I had a period of time where I was doing about 30 to 45 minutes in a infrared sauna every single day. And I started getting headaches because I couldn't keep up with the hydration of it. So you got to be on top of it. But
yeah, not just the water too, the electrolytes and all that stuff.
Totally.
But one of the interesting, we interviewed this woman, Dr. Berkson, in Austin for the documentary. And I got on the Zoom with her, and her camera wasn't working, but she kept making me wait to get her camera working. And I figured out why. Was she got on and she started talking, and then she said she was 76 years old. I thought she was 54, so young, youthful and vibrant considering her age. And she accredits it all to understanding the toxin issue. So she grew up organic food, everything really healthy, and all of a sudden started getting cancers. While being in the health field. It's why am I getting cancers? And ultimately what she thinks happened was her mom was someone who, there was a cohort of women in the 1920s or 30s that were given an injection of a substance that ended up being extremely toxic. And she thinks it was passed on to her. And through no fault of her own, was dealing with that despite living a very healthy lifestyle. And so she did the niacin sauna protocol. And when she did it, along with other detoxing things, and she ultimately got rid of her cancers and got really healthy.
Cancers.
They kept springing up like different.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like crazy. And so she did the protocol and measured her toxin levels through different tests. And again, like we said, it's hard to measure. But what happened was she stopped the protocol and saw the decrease, but then she kept measuring over a year, and it kept going down and down. And the argument was by doing a significant decrease, it increased her body's ability to detoxify. So it opened up like a...
And based on what you were saying before
potential.
with the immune system,
Right.
like improving the immune system's ability to, get rid of toxins.
You're clearing a lot of stuff that's causing problems out,
Mm-hmm.
which then allows the body to do a better job of handling it in the first place. So like more toxins creates worse detoxification. They're both vicious cycles.
Yep.
Or vicious or virtuous cycles.
Totally. But I want to talk about the infrared versus dry sauna.
Okay.
Because, I'm sure they both are great and both work fantastic. I feel like when I do the dry sauna, I sweat a lot more. It's a quicker effect. With the infrared, I feel like it's a little more enjoyable, and maybe over time I sweat more. Like initially it takes me a lot longer to sweat, but then when I do sweat, I end up profusely sweating.
Yeah.
What have you kind of learned from studying, dry sauna versus infrared?
So people who do the niacin protocol, they'll do 1 hour of the infrared, whereas they used to have to do 4 hours of the dry.
Really?
Like the 9/11 survivors did 4 hours a day in the dry sauna. And now they do 1 hour 15 in the infrared. And the main argument for the people who promote that is the infrared sauna is able to detox like 4.1 times the amount. So there's one study by Dr. Klinghart that showed this. There's not a ton of research on this, but that's what people are going on right now. So it's a different heating mechanism. So infrared's raising your core body temperature, and it's penetrating differently. And when they've tested the sweat, it showed higher concentrations of heavy metals relative to dry sauna.
Interesting.
Again, not a ton of research on it.
But from what we've seen so far.
But from what we've seen so far, yeah. And, people who do infrared, it's more tolerable because the exterior heat isn't as hot. It's not heating around you as much. So it's a more comfortable experience. And some people love dry because it's a more intense experience. So they're both great, but that's the main argument for infrared over dry sauna.
In the documentary, obviously, so you interview 9/11 survivors. You interview some doctors, toxin experts. Who were those people that you talk to within the documentary?
Yeah, so I wanted to find the most compelling or, just great people to interview for the 9/11 component. A lot of people aren't comfortable talking about it because it just brings up a lot for them. So the people who did talk, it was kind of a brave experience for them to kind of relive it. So we had 9/11 survivors, toxicology experts, people who like Dr. Berkson, who's studied the environmental toxin issue and written dozens of books, and is incredible. And we interviewed Travis Talmadge, who's the founder of Bathhouse, which is like an incredible sauna facility here in Flatiron.
Yeah, if you ever get the chance, if you're in New York City, you should definitely check that out. That's a great spot.
So it was interesting because he's, he sees thousands of people come through there and their experience with sauna in general.
Yep.
We interviewed Dr. Raleigh Duncan, who's an infrared sauna expert. We interviewed me.
What did everyone kind of have to say? Is it kind of just echoing the things we already talked about how significant these effects are?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, everyone had varying degrees of awareness around it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say Dr. Berkson had the deepest understanding of its impact outside of the 9/11 survivors. Because the 9/11 survivors, they just like looked around like everyone's getting better, and they're like, why is this working? And then they'd go to their doctors, and their doctors would shrug, being like, this doesn't make sense to us. So, different levels of awareness around it. Dr. Berkson's, what she shared is she worked with someone who's passed away named Dr. Walter Krinian, who was convinced you can cure anyone. He had 100% hit rate on autoimmune issues using the niacin sauna protocol because he was convinced of just an insane causal linkage between the two. So that's a massively under-researched area now.
He's passed away?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she's kind of taken over a lot of his research.
She does a lot of her main book is something called Hormone Deception, and so she looks at how toxins mess with hormone signaling. And so she actually has some interesting supplements I've tried that that work to detox again we get into science, right? But like the hormone receptors and allow the hormones to signal properly.
So like the getting rid of like estrogen mimicking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's made formulations that help with that.
Interesting.
And
and it's just like binders.
But a lot of like formulations of like natural substances that have I wouldn't say binders, I don't know what you call them, but they have the specific capacity to remove the toxins from those receptor sites.
And so for those that don't know, by the way, binders are just things that bind to toxins, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's a good point. Yeah.
Very
So those are things like activated charcoal, chlorella.
Is activated charcoal the best one? I know it's the most well known, but
there's different pros and cons for each of them. And then some people say that charcoal doesn't only bind to negative to toxins. And then some people say it does, and it just adsorbs purely to the negative, like the toxins. But there's different pros and cons to each of them. And then there's, I say this based on like a 50,000 person Facebook community of Niacin sauna users who argue the pros and cons of these and then link to their own ideas. And as you've seen with like different nutritional advice, like there's a lot of information to sort through, and people become very tribal around what's true and what's not true, or what they believe or don't believe, not what's true or not true. So, but yeah, those are what binders do. And so typically on the protocol people are using, actually he uses some clay. I'm forgetting the name of the clay.
Yeah, I've heard people using the clay.
Yeah, there's a clay that's very good at binding as well.
Fascinating. And the process of making the documentary, you don't hear every day about someone just going out and doing some investigative journalism and doing their almost a documentary on their own,
Yeah, I partnered with a great director who works for an offshoot of HBO called Wise Child. It's not under them, but he does work with them. And we kind of scripted out the narrative we wanted to tell, which is the 9/11 story as a vehicle for explaining this protocol, and then expanding it out to how it affects the average person. So it's an extreme example of environmental toxins, how this protocol healed everyone, and then how that relates to the modern world and what we're exposed to, which is also criminally talked about. Yeah. Because it's an invisible issue. So people who don't have health challenges yet, or if they don't have any, hopefully they never get them, or aren't dealing with anything, there's no reason to think about it, really. Like, I get that. But once you're, like with your experience, like once you're forced to confront something, it becomes important. And unless you're at 9/11, you visibly saw the plumes, and I show in the trailer like the plumes of environment, like the building materials.
Yeah.
But we don't see, the VOCs in the air from the couch.
Mm-hmm.
Any of these modern materials.
I just learned the other day that the biggest toxin in New York City is tire brake dust.
Okay, that's interesting.
And
the tire stopping, and then
the tire stopping, and then the dust, and everyone's breathing that in, and it's the biggest cause of toxins for New Yorkers.
Outdoors.
Interesting.
Well, some of the toxin experts, like one of the toxin experts I spoke to, he argues like everyone's focused on food, but you're actually breathing in and out thousands of times a day, and so your home environment, your carpets, your couches, your mattress, those things are off-gassing all the time.
Yeah.
And you're breathing those in. So that was an interesting one.
That's interesting. I need a good air purifier. I'm convinced I'm allergic to something in my house.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Let's make sure you don't have mold.
I know, right? I know. Exactly. Yeah, a lot of people in Florida, the mold issue is crazy.
Is it?
Yeah, it's because it's so humid there.
Yeah.
And is mold it seems like a mold would be a good vehicle for the...
Mold's a huge one for sauna. So it was an interesting study. They took people who had mold exposure and they measured their urine and their sweat. And when they did sauna, they found mold in the sweat, first of all. And they also found more in the urine because it was like the body being, okay, we have an opportunity to detox and sweat it out through the urine.
Whoa.
So it's amazing for mold. Yeah. And mold is a wildly underreported issue in living environments.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And the cause of a lot of autoimmune conditions that people don't even realize.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's all these stories of people like just moving apartments and everything goes away.
Yeah. No, I know. It's crazy. I know.
It's in the Bible. They talk about it in the Bible. Yeah.
That's interesting. What do they say? Do you remember?
It's just like something. They label it something else, but it's about like if you're exposed to this, leave. Like just get away from it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's like almost like an unholy spirit kind of thing. I don't think anyone's gonna prove me wrong on that. I'm almost 100% positive that's an accurate.
That's interesting
statement.
Justin, is there anything from, the book, the documentary, this whole protocol in general that we haven't talked about today that we'd be remiss if we didn't cover it, if we didn't touch on, some different things? So, I think one of the things would be like for people who, want to try this protocol and don't want to coach.
Yeah.
The best resource, there's the book. I'm sure, like you mentioned, there's like communities online and some places you could go. Is there a really good place to kind of just, see the protocol broken out?
Yeah, I think it's my book.
Yeah, that's the best spot.
I'll plug my book.
Hell yeah.
Sweat, Uncovering Your Body's Hidden Superpower. I go into all the components of the Niacin sauna protocol and then everything else that has to do with sauna. So
nice. What else from the book that we haven't talked about today?
That was fun. I've never done the.
Yeah, that was fun. In terms of other stuff and the effects of sweat.
I feel like we've covered it.
Yeah,
like
it's
my
such
whole
a good vehicle to talk about sweat in general.
Yeah. Like, zooming out the idea, even the simple idea that most people don't realize that sweat actually detoxifies. What's funny is if you go to Google and you search sweat and toxins, there'll be all these articles saying that it actually doesn't sweat out. You don't sweat toxins out. But it's this weird, I don't want to get like conspiratorial, but like it's a mislabeling of the terms. Because if you Google search toxins, what you'll find is something related to like snake venom. So like the real term for toxins is, I think it's xenobiotics is what you really should call it. And then sweat, it's like it's your sebaceous sweat. So they're like, because of the labeling, they say sweat doesn't sweat out toxins.
Oh, okay.
So you see all this stuff trying to disprove it. Don't believe them. It 100% gets out heavy metals and man-made chemicals. So that's interesting. But that idea, like there's even a cohort of people who just don't know, like, oh, sweat actually gets these substances out. So, there's layers to the thing. Mm-hmm. But it's weird because I don't compare myself, but I think of the other health people who you've interviewed or people who've devoted their lives to this. I just feel like I stumbled into it and no one is talking about it, even at like the highest levels. Mm-hmm. So I think it's arguably one of the more important missions I could focus on right now.
Yeah, we got lunch one time and ran into Andrew Huberman and told him, and we told him about that.
Yeah,
well, that was funny.
Well, yeah, we saw him there, and then I ran across to Higher Dose because they were carrying my book, and came back with 2 copies for him and his friend. And when I went up to the table, I said, "Excuse me," and I could see like, another person trying to talk to me. I was like, "I wrote a book," and then he was like, "Oh, okay," and then I handed them to.
Nice.
But I was very nervous, and so I don't know if you read it or not, but
yeah, it's funny. Well, Justin, dude, I appreciate you doing this today. This was a fun one. I think it's a conversation like we kind of have talked about that no one's really having. That's like super, super powerful. When does the documentary come out? What's the details with that?
Well, hoping to have the trailer out in the next couple weeks, so by April.
Okay.
And then the full documentary early May, hopefully.
Nice.
We're still setting a date. Just want to make sure we get it 100% right.
Sweet. Well, I'm looking forward to checking it out and appreciate you guys for listening.
Thanks for having me.